It is the 15-year anniversary of the decision. You wrote about it for CBS Sports. You came up with 15 ways the decision changed the NBA. And I got to tell you, Jared, like all these websites now, they have that little timer at the top that tells you how long it's going to take you to read it. And
Oh God.
when I saw 30 minutes, I was like, "Oh my God, what did he do? How long were you working on this for?" How many words did that come out to?
Um, it's like around 5,000 words, I
That's what I
think.
thought.
I went pretty long on it. When they asked me to do the story, I was like, all right, yeah, I think I can do that. I think I can come up with 15. And I wound up coming up with like 25, and I had to cut them all down or combine them
Oh wow.
into one thing. Just it really did change the shape of the league forever, obviously. And there are so many different ramifications that you feel both on the court, like especially on the court, but also off the court in so many different ways. Um, and not just in terms of what happened the next few years that he was in Miami, but so many years since then. Everything from the CBA to the type of basketball that gets played now, and player empowerment, and all these different things that I wrote about. And it was really fun to look back and to look over the last 15 years and everything that's happened since then, and just be like, I'm gonna look at, like, I literally looked at like the standings and be like, how is this team touched by it? How is this team touched by it?
Hmm.
How is this, just to come up with all of the different ramifications around the league and for specific teams. It was really fun to work on and to write. And I'm sorry for anybody that takes the 30 minutes to read it. I did see that on the website too, and it's daunting, but I would really appreciate it if people did read it. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I think it is an sort of an important snapshot or timeline of everything that we've seen go on in the 15 years. I still can't believe it's been 15
I know.
years since that happened.
A little depressing. Yes, it. I will tell you when I see that little timer and it's like a big number, like 30. I do race to the timer, like I'm racing Waze while driving, and I beat it. I think I came in at like 25 minutes, which was pretty good.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm a
I
very fast reader, so it takes me like considerably less time. But I
I'm a
also
slow
wrote it.
reader.
So
Yeah,
like when I read it, there's like I know what each sentence says already. So it'll take me like 20 minutes probably to
yeah.
read it.
Classic speed reading strategy. No, definitely go read it. There's 100 things that I could ask you about from that piece because it was really interesting to go through it. You did a really good job of kind of finding those tentacles and those branches and things like, oh yeah, I guess it really did sort of influence this X, Y, and Z. We don't have enough time here to do the whole thing, but that's why you wrote it and that's why it exists on cbssports.com. So I do encourage everybody listening to go ahead and check that out because it's worth it. But I did want to highlight a couple of things and ask you about it. And you mentioned the player empowerment part of it. And that's sort of the most obvious thing. Like when you think about the decision, it is one of those landmark moments in NBA history where there's a before and an after, right? There's before the decision, there's after the decision. After the decision, you can kind of look at the decision as the birth of the player empowerment era. And you wrote about that part and you mentioned how basically once LeBron did the decision, a lot of players tried to do their own version of the decision and kind of followed suit over the next few years. You mentioned how Kevin Durant in his free agency did a similar thing, taking meetings and things like that. And then he had his own weird version of an announcement with the sleeveless Sports Illustrated cut thing. And then in 2019, he announce it on like boardroom TV on Instagram Live or something, like some weird, like they all try to do their version of it. We saw Gordon Hayward take meetings during a 4th of July weekend a couple of years or a few years after the 2017, I think that was. We saw Kyrie Irving leave the Cavaliers in 2017, kind of doing a similar, like, oh, I want my own team player empowerment thing. But you also mentioned, I thought this was very astute, how it wasn't just that part. It wasn't just like the big storyline narrative, let me control it here. It's just the fact that we have a trade demands, a list of preferred destinations. When like do we think that players are weighing in on roster decisions, coaching decisions, getting coaches fired, getting like players, star players, getting teams to hire their support staff, training staff, coaches, assistant coaches, all these things. And I thought it was really interesting um, to kind of see how many ways that players wield the player empowerment stuff now. My question to you, though, is do you think this has been good for the league now that we've kind of seen this over the last 15 years?
That's a good question. In terms of driving interest in the league, absolutely. Like the league makes a killing off of the transactional stuff, and another thing that I wrote about was like the scoops era
Yep.
of transactional reporting. Like that has been, I would say, it's been beneficial for the league attention wise. It has not been beneficial for the league in terms of bringing attention to the on-court product. So it's sort of like a double-edged sword there. In terms of like the other ways that players wield their power, like I'd rather the players have the power than the owners. That makes much more sense to me. I do think that a lot of players have not been particularly good at wielding their power when they want certain roster decisions or certain coaches hired or fired, or to go to certain destinations. I think that a lot of them, there's a reason they're players and not executives. Some of them might make good executives after their careers are over, but being a player and an executive at the same time is extremely difficult, and you wind up just wanting to play with your friends. And when your friends are Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh in the prime of their careers, that's great. When your friends are not those guys, then it doesn't work great.
Yeah, when you're trying to trade for Russell Westbrook, it's a little bit different. I don't know that the player empowerment thing was good. It felt like, and this has nothing to do with the money or whatever, but like to your point, like the players who tried to do it were really bad at it.
Mm-hmm.
And like the whole big three model that you also wrote about in this piece, that also kind of came out of this, where guys like Kevin Durant looked around and like, well, LeBron could do it in Miami, I can do it in Brooklyn or Phoenix, or Kyrie Irving trying to do it. Well, and I think that the missing element, there's a couple missing elements, but the missing element that all these other big threes tried to do, whether it was in LA, Oklahoma City, Brooklyn, Phoenix, the Lakers tried to do it with Kobe and Steve Nash and Dwight Howard and all these things. The missing element was that the big three guys are in the primes of their career, and one of them is literally the best player on the planet. That helps. But the other part of it too was that it wasn't just those three guys going into a blank slate organization and trying to import something. Like LeBron and Chris Bosh joined Dwayne Wade in Miami, where he had won a championship 4 years prior. There was experience. There was, the Pat Riley, the Heat culture stuff, all this stuff. Eric Spoelstra, who was on staff during the finals run in 2006, was now the head coach in 2010. Like that it doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but I think that was a really big deal in terms of LeBron and Chris Bosh coming into something and learning from that, versus Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving just trying to import all of that, for instance, into Brooklyn, just because Kyrie had won a championship somewhere else and Harden had won MVPs and Durant had won championships in Golden State. It's just harder for all those things to mesh and to import it, versus, everybody to kind of coalesce into something that already exists. I don't know if I'm explaining myself right, but that to me was like kind of one of the big takeaways from the failure of the Big Three era.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Although like LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love basically imported like the culture is LeBron to the Cavs, and they went to 4 straight finals and won.
That was the other big missing element in the other big threes, just not having LeBron.
Yeah,
as part of it. Yeah,
Durant's move to Golden State was pretty wildly successful. And I should note, because you did bring up Durant's free agency earlier, that the one I was referring to was the 2016 free agency, not the 2010 extension, where he just sort of announced on Twitter, I'm signing an extension at basically like a couple days before LeBron did the decision.
And he was the anti-LeBron for a long time.
And everybody was like, oh, this is what you should do, Kevin Durant. 6 years later, he's doing basically exactly the same thing, taking meetings in the Hamptons and deciding he's going to go play with the Warriors.
I just want to know how much money did that tweet raise for the Boys and Girls Club, Kevin Durant? That's all I want to know.
Yeah.
What was the other thing that I wanted to ask you about from the Big Three piece? Or not the Big Three piece, the decision piece. Oh, the basketball part of it. You mentioned how it ushered in like the pace and space era, and you're totally right. And we're still maybe more than anything, that's the part of it that we're still living in 15 years later. We've just seen evolutions of it, but it's very much the same thing. And I remember talking to Steve Kerr when I was covering the Warriors, and he used to talk about how like there would be no death lineup with Draymond at the 5 if not for Chris Bosh, the way that Spoelstra used Chris Bosh at the 5 during those peak years of the Big Three era in Miami. And I thought it was a really good point that you made.
Yeah, when Bosh retired, I wrote about literally the exact thing, and about how he changed the NBA by being the small ball center that was like blitzing and trapping and switching all over the place and stretching the floor on the other end because he turned himself into a 3-point shooter during the time that he was in Miami. Like he is one of the crucial figures in like the history of the NBA because of his role on that team. And I do want to give credit to Tom Haberstroh, who wrote the story in ESPN that basically introduced the term pace and space to the NBA lexicon because Spoelstra went to Oregon to watch Chip Kelly's Oregon Ducks football teams and learn from him. And it was Kelly who sort of introduced the idea that they should be using those things to their advantage. And that was after the 2011 season when they had lost to the Mavs in the finals. And what they did over the next 2 years, the way they ran roughshod over the league with that system, it changed basically everything. And like you said, like that's the one we're still living with more than anything. Like that and player empowerment are the ones we're living with more than anything else. That was just like the permanent changes that like the league will never be the same.